Okay. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our session, ML-driven multi-touch attribution, delivering next-level marketing insights. My name is Jonathan Lee. I'm a marketing manager at Treasure Data. We serve over 400 customers globally on the enterprise level with our customer data platform. Today, I'd like to introduce today's presenter, Dilian Kovachev, who's a manager of machine learning and engineering at Treasure Data. Dilian has over 10 years of experience as a data analyst, performance optimization engineer, and data scientist in the field of finance, MarTech, and education. Dilian loves working with people and helping others as much as he enjoys writing code and working with data and numbers. As a manager of machine learning team at Treasure Data, he focuses on helping internal teams and clients implement machine learning solutions in the CDP and extract and visualize valuable insights from their data. Dilian's also involved with the R&D and innovation practices at Treasure Data, where he more recently led the development of our latest machine learning-driven solutions, such as next best action and multi-touch attribution with Shapley values. So for some quick housekeeping before we get started, an on-demand version of this webinar will be available immediately after the presentation. Please feel free to click and download the attachments below your screen. There's some useful blogs and videos that you can take a look at after the event. During the presentation, we'd love to hear from you, so please ask any questions during or after the session, and you can submit them below, and we'll do our best to answer them. So with all that said, Dilian, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. So hi, everyone. Excited to present today. And without further ado, I will start by sharing my screen and kind of walking you through the plan of today's presentation. And there will be time for questions at the end as well. So let me just screen share, make sure everyone can see presentation. This full screen. So I am assuming everyone can see and hear. If not, please, indicate somewhere in the chat so I know. But assuming everything's going well. So today we're going to be talking about multi-touch attribution in general, focusing on the machine learning-driven Shapley values model. Just a quick note that as of right now, we believe Treasure Data is the only CDP who has developed such a model, such an approach to machine learning to multi-touch attribution, and want to give credit. This was actually built with collaboration with the ARM ML research team. So there's definitely there's a wider team of data scientists reading research and working for many months to develop and optimize this model. So here's the agenda for today. First, we'll cover the standard, multi-touch attribution models. Then we'll present the Shapley model and how it's kind of different. We'll compare the pros and cons of using deterministic versus the this data-driven approach. We'll show you an example of a dashboard that we built that our clients can use to compare the different models and get insights, and then use that to kind of adjust marketing strategies. We'll also talk a little bit about what are some ways you can use these insights to decide how to communicate changes. Let's say you've been using a certain approach for a few years, and now you decide you want to use data and you want to tweak that approach to try to improve marketing ROI. What are some good practices to do that? And then we'll end up with the Q&A at the end. So, I'm assuming most people on this call are familiar with multi-touch attribution, but for those who might not be, let's just quickly intro what multi-touch attribution is. It's typically used in marketing, digital marketing, to track customer touch points during the customer journey of engaging with a brand, and trying to evaluate how much each touch point contributes to marketing KPIs such as conversions or engagement, whatever the goal of the campaign is. And the reason why we need multi-touch attribution is because at the end of the day, you have budgets you're spending trying to personalize messages and get the consumer attention on many different platforms, both digital and physical. You want to have some kind of way to measure how much each touch point is contributing, so that you can measure, the ROI or return on marketing spend for each channel, and maybe try to over time adjust your budgets towards the channels that might be performing better. So the popular models that have been used for years in the industry are, first touch, last touch, linear, U-shaped. There are a few more deterministic ones that can get a little more complex, such as time decay, etc. But we're just going through some of the more popular ones, and then go into the Shapley. So just to set some context, a multi-touch attribution model is usually set up where, let's say, I don't know, let's say the conversion event is you want someone to submit a form to share some interest in the product, and you're trying to send them different banners, maybe to fill that form. Maybe you're also giving them that form when they go to conferences or some kind of live events, and you're tracking all these touch points and who's submitting the form. And so you, first of all, you want to define how long a customer journey is, an average journey. So that will determine your look back window. So let's say you're saying that from the first touch point to the form fill, on average, it takes about 7 days. So that might be your look back window. And day 1 will be the beginning of the journey. Day 7 would be the end of the journey. And then you want to track what kind of marketing channels the user was exposed during that. And so a first touch, it just gives credit to whatever channels started that journey. So whatever brought them first to the form or to the page that started their journey, those would get all the credit. Last touch would give all credit to the channels that were, the user was exposed to right before the actual conversion event. And then linear just tries to give equal credit along the whole journey for all the channels that were present during those touch points. And then U-shaped is, it tries to be kind of a balanced approach, not to overlook any of the channels that are performing well at different stages, but still tries to give more credit to first touch and last touch. And then it could either give like partial credit to everything in the middle, or it might just give 0 credit. So maybe first touch gets 50 and last touch gets 50, or it could be first touch gets 30, last touch gets 30, and the rest 40 is distributed evenly amongst the other channels. So these are the deterministic models. They they can be useful. They can make sense for your business. And here's kind of a quick example. If we have like a 4-step journey, again, like if you're using first touch, paid search would get all the credit since it started a journey. Someone searched for a product, and then maybe they saw social media, an email. But if you're applying first touch, the first search would give all the credit. Last touch in the second journey, again, I guess the way it's set up is maybe they first clicked on a social media, then again, they opened some emails, but then before they purchased, they did a quick search for the product, and then they purchased. Again, search would get all the credit. And linear, as you can see, all of them would get equal. U-shaped, email, person last touch will get more of the credit, and the middle will get even. So how is Shapley value model different? Well, I'll explain a little bit more how it works, but just quick bullet points. The deterministic models typically don't utilize real behavioral data coming daily in real time. So you might decide, for this quarter we have these budgets, we're running these campaigns, and we'll use a last touch attribution. So no matter what happens during the campaign, if you're applying last touch, then whatever channels are good during that, closer to conversion will get most of the credit. So that kind of overlooks, things that might shift, let's in the middle, while a data-driven approach would actually dynamically, update as you put in more data, as well as we'll go more into detail, but it doesn't actually overlook any of the touch points. The Shapley model also takes into account the sequence in which the touch points occur and the time component. So, uses all the combinations in which different channels are exposed during the journey, user is exposed to, and so it takes that dependence as well, which could be valuable. While deterministic models don't do that. And then deterministic models usually, don't give you, don't tell you the partial credit that each channel might have. Even if you lose, if you use last touch, you're just giving the credit to the last points. While Shapley values always assesses the contribution to the final decision at each step of the journey, even if it's very small. It will be able to assess that. And so we believe that, because it's data driven, it's actually more like closer to real world, and it's more fair. That's the design of that model. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it can work for any campaign or any business model or any marketing strategy. So we'll talk later about how we can advise using a combined approach versus maybe picking just one model. But these are the general comparisons between the two. So I'm a visual person, and hopefully there's been a lot of talking. So hopefully this kind of graph will give you a little bit more of an idea of how that works. So what we're seeing here is a distribution. Let's say we're looking at a marketing campaign where we have about 300 index positions, so 300 touch points, and then 300 would be the beginning, so it goes from right to left, where this would be the first touch point, and 0 would be where the conversion happened. So what we're seeing here is the distribution of different ad impressions during each stage, and to show you how deterministic models might overlook a lot of the credit that should be given to channels and might favor a few channels. We can just look at this distribution and say, if you use first touch, maybe like the channels right here, the marketing touch points right here will get most of the credit. That means that all the stuff that's happening here, all the spend, all the impressions are not getting any credit, and it's kind of hard to imagine that they don't really matter. So if you're losing last touch, then you capture this part of the curve, but then you overlook anything that happened before that. And something like linear or U-shape, might capture this part of the curve, but not what happens here, or U-shape might do something like this, but it will still overlook stuff in the middle. So deterministic models at the end of the day tend to favor 2 to 3 channels, depending on how many you're using. But typically what you see is first touch is usually channels like search and email are pretty strong, because that's how often like customer journeys start. For last touch, you might see things such as display ads or social do better, because those are usually like high frequency impressions. So like maybe when the user is already browsing the site and about to purchase, they have been also on Facebook or on Instagram, and they saw some ads and then they purchase, and that's why those ads might get more credit towards the end. So what Shapley Values does is it actually, like I said, it uses real data. So it takes the customer journeys, it parses them, it figures out which one result in the conversions, which one don't. We'll get a little more details into the next page of how that works. But at the end of the day, what you're seeing here is each color is a different channel or a different part of the journey, and whenever there are spikes, basically this figured out that yellow is search, for example. So it saw that search did well towards the beginning, but it also does well in the middle for a lot of the journeys that were in the data, as well as close to the actual conversion. So it captures the actual variability in the data, meaning it doesn't really overlook any of the channels that spike, whether it's the beginning, end, or middle of the journey. And this way, you're trying to capture most of this curve in the data. So how how is that done? What's the model under the hood? What are the approaches that allow that? So the Shapley model is the approach is twofold. Um, the first part is a neural network, which is a deep learning machine learning model called LSTM for short, or long short-term memory. So the why we use this neural net is because it's capable of learning order of dependence in a sequence prediction problem, meaning you can incorporate time component to the attribution model, and the time component here would be, like I said, the steps in the journey and the order in which they happen. So each journey is indexed with the step index, and then whether that journey resulted in conversion, and then for each step of the journey we can flag which channel the user was exposed to, and then that model is trained. The model's goal is to predict whether the journey resulted in conversion or not. So we're using real-time data, right? All the data that we get. Um, like I said, you could join together physical, digital touch points. At the end of the day, we get whatever channel the user was exposed to and whether the journey resulted in conversion or not. From that, the model learns, depending on the order, the frequency that we see, the channels being appearing as touch points in the journey. The model learns which ones result in the conversion and which ones don't. We optimize this model for, basically we're trying to optimize the information loss or log loss, which just means that we're trying to get as close possible to the real probability. So from that we freeze the model, and the next method that we apply is called Shapley values. It's basically it's a game theory approach that was designed to try to distribute fair credit to players in like a multiplayer game where they might be working towards a common goal, but have an unequal contribution to the goal. So an easy way to understand this would be a sports game. So you can apply Shapley values. For example, let's say you have data on a basketball season for a specific team, and you know which players played in different games and what the final score was, and how many minutes they played. So um, when you take all that data together and try to predict the final points outcome, you can take all the combinations of whether a player was in and out of the game, for how many minutes they played, and then you can then say, okay, well, LeBron James, for example, should get like a lot of credit because every time he played, he scored a lot of points. He contributed to the final score a bunch, while some of the subs that maybe come in and out would not get a lot of credit, but they would still get some sort of fair credit instead of totally ignoring their contribution. So in the marketing context, the players are actually the touch points, marketing channels, physical interaction with maybe salespeople and things like that. And the final goal is the conversion event, or whatever the goal of the campaign is. And it's the same approach. So what happens there is, once we train the model, we optimize it, we freeze it, and then the Shapley method just takes channels in and out of journeys and reevaluates the probability that that journey results in conversion. And we take the change, the change in those probabilities uh, to give credit to how much moving in channels in and out of the journeys affected that probability of conversion. And then you average those across all journeys and all touch points and all users, and then all of these will usually add up to the difference between the end goal and the end result, and if it's not conversion. So in this case it's 0 or 1. So all of these would add up to 1, because the final goal is we're trying to predict whether the probability to convert was as close to 0 or close to 1. So when you add these to 1, those end up being the attribution percentages. So like in the deterministic models, it would add up to 100%, but it wouldn't be, you know, 1 or 2 channels getting all the credit. So this is all technical stuff, and I know it might be not as interesting to some of the people who are more interested in the outcome and, you know, how does a marketer use this. So, you know, all the code is written and optimized, and it happens under the hood. The final output for most of the end users would be usually a few tables with the outputs of the model, and then we have a dashboard that we've built that help you visualize some useful statistics. So, you know, the main things that you can learn from this model are which marketing channels are, you know, more cost effective and justify more ad spend, what marketing channels are adding more noise and might not be bringing quality traffic. Like I said, this model has a time component, so you can actually learn from the data, from the real data, which channels actually have more effect on conversion during different stages of the journey. So some might, like I said, you might see that some are mostly effective at the end. So those would be good candidates for a last touch. Some might be more effective at the beginning. Those would be good candidates for first touch. And then some might be effective in the middle or throughout the whole journey. And then you can use all of that to decide how you might want to adjust your marketing strategy. So let's actually look at a live dashboard to demonstrate that. So this is the actual dashboard inside our platform. Basically, you know, this is run on the same data, and we have the code to run all the deterministic model that I presented, as well as Shapley. So, you know, if clients want to actually compare on their data, you know, how different models look like, and go from that, they can do that within one dashboard. Right now, we're looking at first touch, and the marketing channels that we're assessing are affiliates, direct, display, email, paid search, and social. So let's go through an example of some of the deterministic ones, and so that we can show how, you know, Shapley can add additional insights on top of that. So right now we're using it. I'll explain, you know, what each widget is. Right now we've selected first touch. This is like a filter where we can shift between models. So we've selected first touch, and like I said, the journey starts here and goes to 0, where the conversion happens. So for first touch, we can see email and paid search getting, you know, a big part of the credit, while channels such as affiliates and display are getting a much smaller percentage. So you can see here that's displayed with email and search together getting almost, you know, exactly actually 65% of the credit. And then things like affiliates and display are getting, and even social are not getting that much credit. If we look at total impressions, that allows you to sort of look at how many impressions you might have, you know, served for each channel. And this dashboard here shows the ratio of impressions to conversions that were attributed to each channel. So what you really want to see is, you know, if you're using a first touch model, you'll see channels here that have fewer impressions but result in a lot more conversions. So those would be the big bubbles. Would be the channels that for this model seem to be performing best. While a channel like affiliates, where you're getting maybe a lot of cheap impressions, you know, over 3 million impressions, but at the end of the day, the model says they only really affected about 300 of the conversions. So the ratio impressions to conversions is not that high, and you know, this appears to be like a channel bringing in a lot of noise, but not like real users who are looking to convert. If you do bring your marketing spend data to our platform, you can also show things such as CPA, which is one of the, you know, main KPIs that are used for direct response campaigns, because you're trying to you're trying to have as low cost per acquisition. That's what CPA stands for, cost per conversion. You can say you want to have as low as possible, meaning that, for example, for paid search here, we spend 2K, let's say, within that quarter or month or whatever, just as an example, and paid search resulted in about, let's see, in about 3.7K conversions. So, for each 70 cents you spend, you actually generate a conversion. So that's a really good ROI. While affiliates, even though affiliates is a cheap channel, and you've only spent 4.5, I mean, only, it's still like pretty high, but you spend 4.5K on it, but because it only resulted in 300 conversions, you actually spend $15 for each conversion. So not as effective. So something that you can do from this is, if that's what your data looks like, you can say, listen, we can definitely shift some spend from affiliates to search, as well as potentially email. I mean, search and email are like, with first touch, are the top performing channels, and then social and direct. So having walk through this one, let's do a quick last touch view just to show you how that changes towards those channels that we discussed earlier that might have high frequency, and closer to conversion, they might get more credit. So when we switch to last touch, all of this adjusted. Now you can see social and display getting a lot more, as well as affiliates, and actually email shrinking a lot. Paid search still kept its a decent amount of its attribution, but these channels, the high frequency ads, social display, they got more credit, and everything adjusted in the dashboard. So now email CPA is really high. So you can see that which model you pick can really affect how you view performance. And if it's not data driven, then like I said, you might make some wrong judgments in some situations. Now, if we select Shapley, what you really hope for is that the overall balance would make sense to your business, and there wouldn't be a single channel that looks too overlooked. But again, it's learning from the data, so the data still might say that one channel is just bringing a lot of noise, and this is kind of what we can see here. So let me explain the way Shapley works. So like I said, Shapley would look at each touch point and start, attributing might be small amounts of attribution early into the journey, but at the end they all will add up to whatever this final percent is. So you can see that what Shapley learns and thinks is that still most of the credit should go to the channels that were closer to conversion, but because it also estimates partial credit, some of these channels start spiking earlier. So things like direct, email, paid search, the yellow, the red, the gray, they start spiking from the middle of the journey up, while things like affiliates and social stay pretty flat, and then they spike at the last two touch points. Either way, when all of the partial credit is added across all the touch points, you can see the final percentages being looking a lot more balanced. So now email's still getting a decent amount of credit, which you would expect. It's typically one of the top performing channels. That's where people are. They've actually provide an email. They're real users. You send them promo codes. Email is definitely should get some high percentage. Search as well. If someone's searching for a product and then goes to your page, they're showing some intent. At the same time, display, social, direct are not as overlooked, and affiliate still stays with a pretty low percent. So this is already an example where we looked at a lot of models, and none of the models really gave a lot of credit to affiliate sites. So maybe if you do this analysis, whether you decide to go with Shapley or not, you should think, listen, we should definitely shift some budgets from affiliates to something else. And then when you look at again the bubbles, you're getting like a more even ratio across impressions versus conversions, with again affiliates being pretty small. And when you look at the actual CPAs, you don't see such drastic spikes until affiliates again. So what we learned from Shapley here is that we definitely need to consider how much we spend here, and then we can decide where we want to shift the rest of the budget. But These seem to be the top 3: search, direct, and email. But social and display still getting decent CPAs across. So this is how this dashboard is used. And you can also, if you're really curious, you can also select look at specific touch points. So if you just want to see like what channel's contribution looks midpoint of the journey, you can see that email is actually like not that good, like midpoint. It gets most of the credit towards the beginning and end, but direct affiliates actually seems to be getting decent credit midpoint. But these are just partial credits, so you can look at partial credit across a couple of midpoints. You can see email starts to spike. So very dynamic dashboard, really gives you very deep insights on how channels are affecting consumer decision making, and that's possible because of, like I said, the LSTM network, which takes the sequence of events and can calculate partial credit at each touch point, which something like first touch cannot do. So if we select first touch and I want to see what happens in the middle of the journey, sorry, I have to deselect Shapley, you actually see 0%. So for first touch, you will only see credit if I selecting the first touch point, and that's where all the credit happens. After that, you don't really know what the effect of this channel is in the journey. So this is kind of the cool insights you get from a machine learning driven, data driven model. So let's go back to the deck. And one last thing I wanted to cover, or sort of yeah, so I think we went through the examples, but once you get the information, some of the questions you want to ask yourself is, do these allocations resonate with my understanding of, of what we're trying to do in the business? Does one of the models, really click, or do I need a dynamic approach where different models are applied to different campaigns? So, you might be running 3-4 campaigns. For one of them, Shapely maybe looks really good. For another, where maybe you're mostly sending like email and something else, maybe you just decide, we don't need all this granular info. We just gonna use like first touch because people are mostly getting email and like, I don't know, like a physical mail and pamphlets. So you say like the first touch point is all that matters. That's where the journey starts, and that's where probably the client's gonna decide whether they want to convert or not. So you have to still use, this is where it's art and science. This is where business people and marketing teams come in and apply their industry knowledge, their inner knowledge of the business, of the product, what they've seen historically, and make a judgment call. Now, let's say you try this model on your data, you get some insights, and now you have to have some internal conversations on changing budgets, which could be difficult, or shifting strategy, which sometimes there is different teams that are in control of budgets and strategy. And so what's a good way to communicate this across the org or implement changes? What we recommend is, first, run the model. If the outputs make sense and you have like a good convincing way to share them with stakeholders and decision makers, then obviously communicate that first. Then we would not usually advise to make a major shift, because especially because it's a data driven model, you can do smaller changes. Let's say you shift budgets for the next quarter or or the next month a little bit. You retrain the model, the data keeps coming in, and you measure KPI changes carefully. If you do see the improvement that you expect to see, then it will be easy to get other people on board. Plus, if you're not making like major changes, you're not really stepping on anyone's toes, or really, trying to change strategies too much. And then after that, just gather feedback and keep adjusting gradually. and over time, hopefully the data and the communication will will give you the results you're hoping for, and this way, over time you'll see increased ROI, yeah, and increased marketing KPIs and things like that. So I think you know we can like show we can show an example of that. I mean, an example of the data that goes into the model. I don't really have like, let me see if I have the structured data. So this is the output of the basically the code that builds each model. So what powers this dashboard is, you have the model, the touch point index, and then all the channels, and then how the contribution of each channel. So for the different models, you have that. The data that goes into this basically looks like, I think I can bring it in. I have it open on the side. So let me show an example of that. Okay. This is an example. I hope it's visible. Let me try to bring it in. So this is an example. The data that comes in could have, a timestamp, a user ID. It could be their like first party cookie or whatever the user ID is. Then you have the channel that they were exposed to for each touch point. So each row is a touch point. And then whether a conversion event happened. And so all that data, like I said, this could be digital, but you could also union physical touch points. So you could have like a timestamp here, then user ID, then the channel could say, sales call, or like a conference visit or something like that, or a in-store visit. And then again, that could be part of the journey, depending on timestamp. And then if they converted during that journey, all of that data is, like I said, processed by the model. It's indexed. It's you set your look back window, and then the model does the rest. And the model is going to output something like this, where for each channel, for each index touch point, you get your partial credit, and then the sum across all the touch points would give you the total attribution, which all adds up to 100. So I believe these are the things that I had planned to show as a visual. So I think we are now at the Q&A section. So happy to take some questions. And maybe I'll stop sharing and take some questions.
All right. Well, Dillian, thanks so much for the great presentation. We've got 4 questions from the audience. And if there's any more questions coming in, please feel free to put them in the chat box below. Dillian, the first question for you is, can you please talk more about how you would combine digital touchpoints with physical interactions in one MTA model?
Yeah, and that's a really good segue to what I just showed. So yeah, if you can bring data into treasury data into the customer data platform from any source. So digital data would usually flow in. It will be streamed, real time, usually from our web tag, and then you can bring in, like I said, if you have store visit data or visiting events, you just union all of those in like with a timestamp. So each row would be the touch point timestamp of what happened, and then we also have you need the data where the conversion happened as well with a timestamp. So all of that being unioned, that's the table that the model needs. So you can really bring in anything as a touch point that you think might be part of the customer journey.
Got it. Got it. And from the same gentleman, there's a question asked on top of that. What is the minimum amount of data required for the MTA Shapley model to provide statistically significant results?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So it's different, and I think it mainly depends on typically your look back window and the how long you think it takes from initial touch point to actual conversion decision to happen. So if you think, let's say the event is for someone to just buy like some relatively cheap product, where from initial search to decision it might take no more than 3-4 days, then and then let's say if you're running a campaign to try to promote this product for like a quarter, then you want to have at least a few, probably like at least a week or two worth of data, so at least you can have a couple of journeys if the look back window is 3 days. So it really depends. And if the purchase event is something like buying a car, where it might be a 3-month decision process, and you say that the customer journey might be like 300 touch points or whatever, then you want to have enough data to cover at least the decision making period in the look back window. But the more the better. Obviously, with any data science model is a simple answer, but the minimum is depends on the conversion event and how long you've been running the campaigns for. Yeah, so we can incorporate all that data.
Sounds good. Question from Jesus. How often do you have to retrain the model and update the MTA metrics in a dashboard, and how easy is that to do?
Great question. Yeah, so how often? Similar answer, I guess, to the first question, but because you're not adjusting budgets really weekly. I mean, this is marketing budgets are typically, maybe you adjust them like monthly, maybe quarterly sometimes, but the model is easy to retrain, so there's no harm in retraining it, let's say once a week. But just to check, maybe you see all of a sudden Facebook starts to do insanely well. So maybe something's happening where, something's trending on Facebook or social media, and you're all of a sudden getting a lot more eyeballs and traffic. You might decide to upspend there. But typically, yeah, I think you can retrain it very easily. It's the model is all built of part of like a workflow, which is just something that builds a lot of our data engineering processes under the hood on our platform. And there is a very easy cron scheduling config file where you can just say weekly, daily, custom, hourly update. So you can retrain it as much as you want.
Got it. And another question from the side, does Treasure Data offer pre-built AI for users of your CDP product?
Pre-built AI. Yes, there is like a built-in predictive scoring tool in the UI that requires no code. So you can just, whatever data you have, it's like point and click, drag and drop. You can bring in different data points and point at a attribute you're trying to predict, maybe like how likely someone to convert or how likely someone to churn, and then the model will run under the hood and give you some useful insights of the probability distributions of the predictions, as well as which data points make someone more likely to buy or to churn. So you can use those when you're then trying to decide how to market to different people.
Got it. We've got 1 minute left, and let's just end with this question. Can the code be customized to adjust the attribution model rules and implement a client-specific logic to the data and add that to the dashboard?
Yeah, good question, and this does happen, often. So yeah, so all the models that we have are like pre-built templates that are optimized to work with our platform architecture to run efficiently, to be able to handle a lot of data. And we don't black box anything. I mean, all of the code is available to clients, and we can customize any of it. So if a custom filter or a custom rule needs to be applied, or some of the data needs to be transformed, it is available. Yeah, nothing is like set in stone and rigid in a way. So there is flexibility. Just custom code sometimes could take time, but we have people who can help with that, and sometimes our clients can do that themselves if they have data engineers and data scientists who are working within the platform. Yeah, we have documentation for every model. We can do workshops, trainings. So yeah, we're very client centric, and our goal is always to just make sure that clients are getting as much value of their data as they can, and we try to help them in any way possible. That's why everything is open box, and the data is available. We don't hide anything, basically.
Sounds good. Well, thank you, Dillian, for helping us with this insightful webinar. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. And quick reminder to everybody who's still online to visit the Treasure Data Bright Talk channel so that you can view this session on demand, as well as some of our other content. So thanks again, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Hope this was helpful. Bye.